cabinet confirmation.
The Vice President votes in the affirmative and the nomination is confirmed.
President Trump's pick for Education Secretary is approved, with help from the Vice President. Presenting their cases.
I'm in this for the long haul.
The legal battle intensifies over President Trump's travel ban. Moral awakening.
A crisis in the idea of freedom.
My one-on-one interview with papal biographer and Catholic theologian George Weigel about the state of our nation. A samurai saint? A 17th century martyr is one step closer. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, February 7th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The Senate confirms school choice advocate Betsy DeVos as Education Secretary, with Vice President Mike Pence breaking the 50-50 tie. Jason Calvi has more on this historic vote from Capitol Hill. Jason.
Lauren, 2 Republicans joined Democrats in the unsuccessful effort to derail DeVos's nomination. But this vote made history. It's the first time a vice president has had to break a tie on a cabinet pick.
The Vice President votes in the affirmative and the nomination is confirmed.
Right up to the historic tie-breaking confirmation vote, Democrats fought Republican donor Betsy DeVos.
She does not have any experience in public education either. She was never a student. She never had children in public schools. She was never a teacher.
During an all-night talkathon, Democrats urged their colleagues to vote against DeVos.
We have great private and religious schools in our country, but public dollars must go to public schools, not private or religious schools.
Republicans Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who joined Democrats in opposing DeVos, say she will undermine public schools in their states. And their phone lines were jammed with calls to protest the Michigan native and her focus on charter schools and vouchers, which make Catholic schools more affordable for parents.
I will be an advocate for parents being able to make those choices.
That's an idea that gets high marks from Republicans, like Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey.
Millions of low and middle income Americans, their kids are not getting the kind of education that they deserve and the opportunity they should have.
And other Republicans say she'll empower states and American families to make important education decisions.
I've known Ms. DeVos for a long time. I find her to be someone whose heart is in the right place and who is a supporter of empowering parents to choose where their kids go to school.
And DeVos is sworn in this afternoon. She'll have to deal with hot-button issues, including rising college tuition costs, growing student loan debt, and for-profit schools, many of which have closed. She'll also have to react to President Donald Trump's promise to pump $20 billion into school vouchers. Lauren?
Busy 24 hours on Capitol Hill. Which cabinet picks are on deck for Senate confirmation for the rest of the week?
Well, the Senate debates and votes this week on Attorney General pick Jeff Sessions, Health and Human Services nominee Tom Price, and financier Steve Mnuchin for Treasury Secretary. Democrats plan to use the maximum time allowed to debate these 3. That means we could see some late night and even a very rare Saturday vote here at the Capitol.
Jason, it sounds like you need your sleeping bag. Thank you so much. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly says President Trump's travel ban was poorly implemented and should have been delayed.
The thinking was to get it out quick so that potentially people that might be coming here to harm us would not take advantage of some period of time that they could jump on an airplane and get here or get here in other ways. Good morning.
Kelly says it's hard to vet immigrants from the 7 countries on the travel ban list because they don't have enough information about them. The Trump administration faces its biggest legal battle so far. Right now, a federal appeals court is hearing arguments for and against the executive order. Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the White House with the details on the legal battle. Wyatt.
Lauren, President Trump says the court battle over his executive order could very well end up at the Supreme Court, but he says he hopes it doesn't come to that because he says his order is, quote, common sense. Tonight, members of the Justice Department are making his case in a federal court.
We're going to take it through the system. It's very important. It's very important for the country regardless of me or whoever succeeds at a later date. I mean, we have to have security in our country.
The president defends his executive order, saying it keeps terrorists out of America.
ISIS said we are going to infiltrate the United States and other countries through the migration. And then we're not allowed to be tough on the people coming in? Explain that one.
While Trump works on public opinion, 3 federal judges are hearing arguments from the Justice Department and the Attorneys General of Washington State and Minnesota. Those 2 states argue the administration has failed to show the country would be irreparably harmed by the suspension of the ban.
I'm in this for the long haul. I believe strongly, and my legal team believes strongly, that the executive order is unlawful and unconstitutional.
The Justice Department disagrees, maintaining the executive order is well within the president's authority.
The law is crystal clear on this. The president has the authority to do this. I have zero concern that at the end of the day we will be fine. It's just a question of going through the process.
On Friday, Seattle U.S. District Judge James Robart temporarily blocked Trump's order. It sets up vetting for travelers coming from 7 countries: Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Tonight, the Justice Department is asking a federal appeals court to restore the executive order. It contends that the president alone has the power to decide who can enter or stay in the United States. Each side will have 30 minutes to present their case to the appellate judges in San Francisco tonight. Now, keep in mind this hearing is not to determine whether or not Trump's executive order is constitutional or not. It's only to decide whether or not the particular hold on the order will remain in place or not. Lauren?
Wyatt, how likely is it that this case could go all the way to the Supreme Court?
Well, Lauren, there is actually a good chance, depending on how the different sides depend on it. Either side could go to the Supreme Court and ask them to take it up, no matter what the appeals court decide. But keep in mind, though, this travel ban is only for 90 days. So more than likely it would expire before it even comes to that point, Lauren.
Wyatt Goolsbee at the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. Iran's supreme leader blasts President Trump in the latest sign of escalating tensions between the 2 countries. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei calls the president a newcomer who is showing the true face of the U.S. He spoke out after President Trump accused Iran of being ungrateful for the sanctions relief approved by President Obama. The president is promising to take a tougher stance. A big win for the president today with the DeVos confirmation, but his immigration reform attempt is still in jeopardy. Joining us now, right here in studio, is Tim Carney, commentary editor for the Washington Examiner. Tim, welcome back.
Thank you.
There are those who say President Trump is operating under this chaos theory and the aggressive executive orders, attacking the media, attacking those who disagree with him. And a lot of Republicans are distancing themselves from him a little bit.
Yeah.
Is this effective? Is this theory, is this way of acting effective, or is it really just chaos?
I think to a large extent it is chaos, but you do see one of the effects is that it's harder for his critics to train on one particular target. Just now, training on DeVos, as they did this week, was the first time that they really were able to grasp onto one single thing. The press, the critics in the press, the critics in the Democratic Party have been shooting all over the place. I don't think that this is some three-dimensional chess, but the effect of chaos does create problems on both sides.
On both sides. The battle over President Trump's travel ban, we are watching this unfold in the federal appeals court. Under separation of powers, does the president have this authority? And if he does, what's everybody squawking about?
Well, first of all, the courts argue, a lot of courts have said that when it comes to national security, yes, the president has broad authority, but much more importantly, Congress passed a law saying that the president is allowed to suspend visas for sort of any class of immigrant or visitor for any period when it's in the national interest. You read the text of that law, and President Trump cites it in his executive order. It's hard to imagine that it's outside of his authority to do it. Whether it's a good idea or not is a different question. Whether he has the legal authority to ban these immigrants, that seems like a clear-cut case to me.
And it's also whether or not he consulted the right people. I mean, this is a politics town, right? So whether or not it was rolled out appropriately and you get people who are fighting against you. Betsy DeVos was confirmed today. She's been on massive attack for school choice. You wrote an article today for the Examiner calling out Democrat Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut. And it says right here on the title, white guy from wealthy suburban high school comes out against school choice. What are you saying?
Well, so Chris Murphy put out on Twitter that, quoting Betsy DeVos, had once used the phrase "a dead end" to refer to some failing public schools, and he said, "Well, public school wasn't a dead end for me." He's a U.S. senator. I pointed out that while his father was a Hartford, Connecticut lawyer, he didn't live or go to school in the Hartford public schools, which really are struggling. Instead, he went to school in a suburb outside of Hartford, in an expensive town, much more expensive than Hartford. So this whole idea of school choice is, in my parish school, anybody can go there, and there's financial aid, and school choice programs would mean it's even more affordable. But nobody can go to Chris Murphy's public school
unless you're making a lot of money.
Unless they can afford to buy a house there.
Excellent. Excellent point. Tim Carney, thank you so much, commentary editor for the Washington Examiner. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. A suicide bomber hits an entrance to Afghanistan's Supreme Court. It's the latest in a series of attacks on the country's court system. At least 19 people died, 41 others hurt after the attacker ran up to a side door of the building in downtown Kabul. Opposition forces have increasingly targeted judges since the execution of 6 convicted insurgents last May. No one claimed immediate responsibility. The wife of a Russian opposition activist says he was poisoned. Vladimir Kara-Murza Jr. is in a medically induced coma. He was hospitalized after suddenly becoming ill. A journalist was close associate of Boris Nemtsov, who was poisoned to death 2 years ago. And a United Nations envoy says a new Israeli law legalizing dozens of West Bank settlements crossed a very thick red line. The law, approved Monday night, allows Israeli homes to be built on private Palestinian land in the West Bank, and opponents say they are going to fight to overturn this measure. Catholic bishops in the Philippines denounce what they call a reign of terror on the poor. In a letter to Filipino Catholics, the bishops expressed their concern and urged the faithful to help the needy. President Rodrigo Duterte has encouraged Filipinos to murder drug dealers, even saying he's killed people to show police how it's done. The Washington Post quotes the president as telling Catholics they can go to heaven with their priests or join him in hell if they want to eliminate drugs. The Rome correspondent for our news partner, the National Catholic Register, is quoted in the New York Times today. It's in reference to ties that the Trump administration has in the Vatican. The front page article outlines what the Times describes as an alliance between conservative Catholics and Steve Bannon, chief strategist to President Trump. It quotes Ed Penton of the Register as saying Bannon understands the, quote, battles the church needs to fight. Ed joins us now from Rome. Ed, it seems like some in the Vatican have found a new hero in Steve Bannon, Trump's senior advisor. What is it that they like about him?
Well, I think, Lauren, it's primarily the fact that he's willing, at least that's the feeling I got from him, that he's willing to really fight the battles that the church is sort of most interested in. It's the pro-life issues, for example, the human dignity issues. Of course, there's the debate over immigration, whether that's really what the church wants, but certainly on the sort of pro-life things and other matters, he is very much committed, it seems, to fighting for those things. And I think they like the fact that he's there in the White House with President Trump.
You say in this piece that Steve Bannon says his focus is on countering cultural Marxism. What do you mean by that, and how is it said to be manifested in the church?
Right. Well, in the church, it's primarily the sort of sense that the church has sort of lost its focus, if you like. It's not so much focused on the next life, on getting people to heaven and salvation, so much as focusing on social justice primarily, those issues which aren't bad in themselves, but they become totally focused on that and essentially on the imminent, on this life, on this earth. And so I think there's a sense that that I think Steve Bannon, but certainly others, I think, seem to think that's the case, and the church has perhaps lost its focus in that sense and needs to re-engage, if you like, on issues to do with primarily salvation and getting to the next life.
There are rumors here floating about in the United States that Donald Trump may meet with the Pope, so it does seem that the administration and the church are joining hands, especially with Steve Bannon in the mix. But the big question is how large is the split between the what are being called the rad trads, the radical traditionalists and Orthodox Catholics and the Pope?
Well, I think there is a certain amount of discontent that's grown over the past 4 years, Lauren, where I think those who are trying to uphold the Church's teaching, they feel a little bit alienated during this pontificate. They feel it's the Pope, for good reasons, is going to the peripheries and trying to bring in those who feel alienated by the Church. But at the same time, they feel left behind, and I think there's a sense that they're on the peripheries, if you like, and they should be taken account of. So I think that sort of gap has widened. And I think there's obviously hope that they'll be brought back into the Church, if you like, or brought back into consideration more.
All right, Ed Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Ed, thank you so much.
Thanks, Lauren.
Coming up, a closer look at Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominee. And Patriots Parade. New England cheers their world champions. Legal and policy experts are reviewing Judge Neil Gorsuch's writings and decisions to better understand President Trump's Supreme Court nominee. Joining us now is Hannah Smith with Beckett, a group that defends religious liberty, and Michael Keneally, a former clerk to both Justice Antonin Scalia and Judge Neil Gorsuch. Welcome to the program, both of you. Let's start with you, Michael. Justice Scalia was just a giant figure, beloved among conservatives. Will Judge Gorsuch follow in his footsteps?
Well, one of the things I think that made Justice Scalia such a legend in the law was his commitment, his fierce commitment to textualism and originalism, a judicial philosophy that says that the law has to be understood as it was understood when it was passed. And if you want to change it, you have to pass a new law to change it. It's the judge's job to apply the law as written.
And he has promised to do just that, to follow in Antonin Scalia's
He's on the
footsteps.
record as a proponent of both of those philosophies, just as Justice Scalia.
And Hannah, let's move on to religious freedom. In the Hobby Lobby case, Judge Gorsuch ruled against the HHS mandate that requires companies to provide contraceptives under Obamacare. But his opinion did stress that the family who owned Hobby Lobby did bear a religious burden. So, what is his commitment to religious freedom?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Judge Gorsuch joined the majority opinion in Hobby Lobby that found for Hobby Lobby, but he wrote separately to say the Green family also suffered a substantial burden on their religious exercise. So he was clearly on the side of Hobby Lobby in that case, and he also voted in favor of Little Sisters of the Poor in their challenge against the HHS mandate. But it's clear from his track record that he also protects the religious liberty of people of all faiths. So, for example, he found in favor of a Muslim prisoner and a Native American prisoner in their challenges to restrictions on their religious exercise while they were in prison. So it's very clear when you look back over Judge Gorsuch's opinions that he applies the law fairly to protect the religious exercise for people of all faiths.
Judge Gorsuch is an erudite man, Marshall Scholar, Truman Scholar, studied at Oxford under John Finnis, who's a legal philosopher who ultimately converted to Catholicism. And then Gorsuch's book, which we have right here, The Future of Assisted Suicide and Euthanasia, grew out of his Oxford dissertation. So that Finnis and that was a big influence on him. How strong are Gorsuch's pro-life beliefs?
Well, as you point out, he has an entire book on the subject of euthanasia. In that book, he defended law as it exists now. There's no constitutional right to euthanasia or assisted suicide. And his book was designed to defend that on the basis of the principle that it's always morally impermissible to intend to take a human life. And
morally
impermissible to take a human life intentionally. Now, he has not addressed an abortion case ever, and he does not approach any of his cases with a sort of policy goal in mind. He applies the law faithfully as it exists at the time, as I was saying earlier. So we can't necessarily infer too much from his book on euthanasia, but as you say, John Finnis is himself something of a legend in Catholic legal thought. He's one of the leading philosophers of the 20th century, now 21st century, developing the thought of St. Thomas Aquinas. And that, I think, influenced Judge Gorsuch, too.
Hannah, what can we expect from the confirmation hearing? We're hearing about this man who is very accomplished, who the conservatives love, most of all conservatives love. Is it going to be more of an attack on Donald Trump, than the opposition to Judge Gorsuch, do you think?
You know, I think we're going to have to wait and see how this all plays out. It's clearly a different kind of climate right now for this kind of a hearing than perhaps it would have been for Justice Kagan or for Justice Sotomayor or even for Justice Alito. But, you know, the administration has said that they want him to be confirmed by Easter so that he can get on the bench and start hearing cases the last 2 weeks of April. So hopefully we'll see him be voted on quickly and we'll get him up on the court.
And quickly, we have to go, but I know that you are probably very excited that your boss is up for a Supreme Court clerk.
Yes,
okay.
definitely. There are 3 of us, actually, who clerked for both
there you go.
Gorsuch and Scalia, and we're all very excited.
I bet you are. It raises your credibility, too. Okay, anyway, Michael Keneally, thank you so much, former Supreme Court clerk, and Hannah Smith with the Beckett Fund. It may be cold and snowy in Boston, but that didn't stop tens of thousands of Patriots fans from lining the parade route to honor this year's Super Bowl champs. MVP Tom Brady and other players rode in World War II-era duck boats. The team earned its 5th Super Bowl championship with Sunday's historic comeback win. Up next, recapturing American democracy.
What America needs is a new Great Awakening.
I sit down with Catholic intellectual George Weigel to talk about the moral truths that shape our country. And a Catholic samurai saint? How one man's historic example provides a lesson for modern Japan. Papal biographer and Catholic intellectual George Weigel says the United States needs a new moral awakening. Last week, I asked him to explain. You say America is fractured and put a twist on James Carville's 1992 election mantra, it's the culture stupid instead of it's the economy stupid. What is the problem with America's moral culture?
I think we are seeing a crisis in the idea of freedom that dominates our public life. If freedom is simply willfulness, if each of us is simply a bundle of desires, and if those desires and their satisfaction are the sole meaning of human rights and the sole purpose of government, then we have a country of 2-year-olds. This is not a society capable of sustaining democratic self-governance if we simply reduce freedom to willfulness. So we're going to try, I'm going to try to suggest tonight that what America needs is a new Great Awakening, different than those of the 18th and 19th century, and that this will be unbelievers as well as believers.
What does it look like? What does that mean?
It looks like a recapturing of the fundamental truths on which American democracy rests. For example, the truth that each of us has an inherent dignity and value that is not given to us by government, but that is natural to us.
Well, that's Catholic social teaching. That's the dignity of person.
That's right. And Catholic social teaching will be a large part of this new Great Awakening. But we hear a lot today about a crisis of democratic values throughout the world, rise of a new authoritarianism, et cetera, et cetera. I think that crisis of values is in fact a crisis of the truths, particularly the truths about the human person, human community, what makes for noble aspiration, that underwrite those values. Values are not free-floating. Values are tied to truths.
So, for example, as you were talking about before, passions and ways that you are just acting out of the body, not the mind and the spirit.
Right. That if it scratches, it should. This is not a mature anthropology in the term of John Paul II.
So what are Catholics' moral responsibilities in light of that analysis?
Well, they begin locally, like most politics is local. Even this kind of depth politics is local. It means raising families in which these truths are understood and communicated and cherished and celebrated. It means conversation with neighbors to help broaden the circle of understanding that we simply can't go on as a country of willfulness, because that means a country of 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds are beautiful little bundles of willfulness.
But they also get down on the floor and start kicking when they don't
right.
get their way. George Weigel, thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
The Vatican releases the Holy Father's Lenten message. The theme is "The Word is a gift, other persons are a gift." The Holy Father says Lent is a key time to ramp up our spiritual life through fasting, prayer, and almsgiving. The Lenten season starts 3 weeks from tomorrow on Ash Wednesday. You can read more on the Pope's message by visiting our partners at the National Catholic Register. Just go to ncregister.com. Finally tonight, a Japanese Catholic samurai is one step closer to sainthood. A mass for the beatification of Justo Takayama Yukan was held today in Osaka. He was born in 1552 and converted to Christianity at the age of 12, and later was forced into exile because of his faith. Last year, the Holy Father cleared the way for his beatification as a martyr. He needs one more miracle before he can be declared a saint. That does it for us this evening. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for joining us. I'm Lauren Ashburn. And don't forget, you can see every broadcast of the show on EWTN's YouTube channel. I'll see you again tomorrow. Good night, and God bless.